Building a midjourney clone for Muslims, a side project overview. So this is going to be an overview of building Ask Deen. This is my version of midjourney. This will be for Muslims, asking important questions and answering them with snippets, the most relevant snippets from the Quran and the Hadith. So this won't be the actual code. This will be an overview, a tech spec of the infrastructure, of how we'll structure things, of how we'll actually be able to finish this project. Come back maybe in a few weeks, maybe 2 months, and we'll actually have this all finished up. I'll go ahead and skip over the intro of why I decided to do this. We'll give an overview for what this product is going to be, how I envision it to come out at the end of it. We'll go over the AI bits, the embeddings, the RAGs, the LLMs, the database choices, some of the API endpoints that we're going to need, the Discord bot as well, of how we'll actually structure this, how will users be able to ask prompts, and ultimately the infrastructure and what I expect to learn out of this. So let's get into it. Like I said, we're going to skip over why. You can feel free to read this at the blog. Essentially, we're going to have midjourney for Muslims. This is very simple. You can break down midjourney basically into 2 sections. You have the Discord app, which users will be able to ask prompts. And then you have the website on midjourney.com, where you'll be able to just see all of your prompts. And so in this scenario, we're going to have, instead of images, we'll have questions and answers. So primarily like user prompts and then the answers that are generated. And then on the web app, we'll be able to just explore other people's questions and answers, which we'll be able to do in Discord, but we'll put it on the web app anyway. And then, of course, you'll have my questions. So you'll be able to dig into like what you had written in the past. Just put it all in one place, as well as some account stuff, because this will be a paid app. We're not going to do work for free. The OpenAI APIs do cost money, so we're going to try to monetize this as well. Account will be able to host all of the billing and whatever information we need. So yeah, we're going to bite Midjourney hard on this project. We'll essentially have a Discord bot that's going to expose the /askDeen command, very similar to /imagine as you've seen. The idea is you let the user enter a prompt, return back the most semantically relevant text from the Quran, the Hadith, and Islamic history, or whatever the most relevant query is from Wikipedia. We're going to throw that in there just to make sure we have the most up-to-date information. Like I said, this will be a pay bot. I don't know what the price is, $4.99, $5 a month. Maybe we'll even do a one-time, where it's just a one-time purchase and it's not a subscription. Maybe we can play with that also, kind of speaking to subscription fatigue. We'll have the web app, which will show users their generated question-answer pairs. And essentially, this is what I expect the responses to look like. I ask on Discord /AskDeen, what is the importance of Salah, prayer? I should receive maybe a few ayat from the Quran, as well as maybe 1 or 2 relevant hadiths, and then the tafsir, which is the analysis of the text. And then, of course, we're going to want to add in a disclaimer at the end of it. Because this is religious, we want to make sure that people know that do not trust some random API. Find somebody that you trust to verify before you make really drastic changes to your life based on these responses. So what's really important is this concept of SLC. This product, at least especially for side projects, I think the more you can scope down and limit the scope of work that you need to do, the better the results will be. Because I'll be a solo developer, I want to make sure that I'm really focused and not building forever, never releasing anything. So simple, lovable, complete, SLC. This, I think, is that. You ask a question, you get a response. Of course, like we saw in Midjourney, you can do a million different things. Once you get the images, you can upscale one, create variations of another one. We're not going to do that. We're going to punt all of that off till after we have the version 1 released. Like immediately off the top of my head, we probably want a see more button. See more from Quran, see more from Hadith, see more analysis. But we're going to skip all that and just release with something quicker rather than later. So next, let's go ahead and dive into the nuts and bolts of the data and AI stuff. We'll go into the database, like I said, and then we'll go over the API that we'll use to generate the generations and the Discord bot as well. So AI and Quran, how does this work? Very simple. We're going to use embeddings. We're going to use RAG. We're going to use LLM, and we'll go over the costs. We'll go over embeddings. RAG is retrieval augmented generation. LLM is obviously the large language model, GPT-4, GPT 3.5, and the like. So essentially what this means is we're going to need 3 data sets. We're going to create some embeddings. That'll be the core engine of how this app works. Semantic searches over a large corpus of data typically will mean implementing some type of retrieval augmented generation solution. So how this actually works is you will generate embeddings of all the text content we want searched over. So what is an embedding? Like we see here, essentially it is a vector representation of some arbitrary piece of text. So if we look at specifically, well, I guess maybe rephrase that in programmer language, it's essentially an array of however many dimensions, the dimensions being the number of numbers in that array. So if we say we have a 768 dimension embedding, that means we have an array of 768 numbers. So how this actually works, for example, we have this text in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. That will be translated into some list of 768 numbers. How this is done, I have no idea. I think maybe it probably leverages some LLM or some type of AI machine learning solution in the back end. I'm not sure. That's why we use endpoints. That's why we're software engineers and not data engineers or machine learning or AI engineers. So that's super handy. We just have these endpoints here that will actually take care of this for us in a really nice, efficient way. So we take in the user prompts. We generate the embeddings using those OpenAI APIs. And then what they do, this is the RAG part, is you mathematically compare the nearness of the input prompt to our data. So if we take a second and take a look at, we go into data in the next. What we do is we generate these embeddings for all of the ayats of the Quran, all of the ahadith, in addition to all the Wikipedia. So we take in that prompt, we generate the list, the vector of it, and then we do a mathematical comparison across our database to find the most semantically relevant corresponding pieces of text. How this is done, again, I'm not sure. We'll get into that database choice in a second. But essentially, it's some type of cosine similarity or k nearest neighbors algorithm where if you have, imagine 3 dimensions, x, y, z, and you have some point on the plot. Let's actually find one here. No, let's have it. And then you have some other point over here. And then maybe you have another point over there. So the k nearest neighbors or the cosine similarity will find the closest to your prompt, assuming this is here. And then those are corresponding to separate text pieces. In our case, ayat of the Quran or ahadith. So we can dive into that as well here. Again, it's very mathy. I don't know this stuff. I write TypeScript. This is not my wheelhouse, but luckily there's a great tooling that lets us set this up without having to know it, which is really awesome. So, like we said, we need to have embeddings for all 6,236 ayats of the Quran, 38,000 or so hadiths, and the embeddings for Wikipedia. Now, the great part is because of Hugging Face, there's a lot of this data is already publicly available. So here is an embeddings, like we mentioned. I showed a little preview. These are embeddings for the Quran. The entire Quran is already done for us. 18,000 rows. No problem. I can just download this and throw it into my database, which we'll get into, and I'm done with the Quran. One thing that we need to do there, however, is add the original Arabic. We cannot just rely on the English translation for completeness. I really want to have the Arabic in here as well. So we're going to do some work. This is some basic ETL data work where we're going to go ahead and add in the corresponding Arabic. And we can do that. You can see there's another reference here. This is the simple Tanzil Quran. What this has done is they have amazing work, by the way, taken every single ayat of the Quran, put it into a markdown file that's easily processable, and it just listed all the Quran out here. And if you've ever been to a Quran.com, it leverages the same data set to represent the Quran. So we can trust that the quality, the accurateness of this Quran is complete, which is essential when you're developing these types of apps. The next is the ahadith, and this one is really tough. If you've are familiar with sunnah.com, you will know how many books of hadith there are. There are 6 major canonical books of hadith, each of them containing tons of content. And some of them are not translated yet. Some of them are not digitized yet. Luckily, again, because of Hugging Face, someone has gone through the work and actually completed majority of the 6 canonical books of hadith and translated them and put them into this data set, which we can just download and throw into our database again. However, this does not have embeddings, so this will be something that we'll need to tackle. Lastly, our Wikipedia embeddings, this is done. This is done. So we don't have to worry too much about this either. This is, again, something that we can throw into our database and get going. So the only real embeddings we'll need to generate are for these 38,000 or so, 34,000 rows of hadith. And we're going to do that on the English translations here. The price for this, because like I mentioned, the OpenAI APIs are not free. They're priced at 10 cents per million tokens. So we're going to go with OpenAI. There's a few other options here, but it's just the biggest in the name. The real rough back and napkin calculations essentially is it's going to cost about 40 cents. So nothing crazy, right? Each hadith is roughly, all the hadith is roughly 4.3 million tokens, about 50 words per hadith, 4 tokens per word, 38,000 or so rows. Shakes down pretty straightforward there. Okay, the actual database choice for an RAG application. You're going to want to use Postgres. You're going to want to use the PG vector extension. Super simple. This, again, is leveraging all the hard work of many folks in the open source community. Essentially, we'll have a few criteria for our database. We need to store high dimensionality data, so our 768 dimension embeddings. We're going to want to query for embedding similarity. We want to make sure we can grab the most semantically relevant text pieces off of an input prompt. So that's what this will take care of. And we're gonna want to leverage something in the AWS ecosystem. I don't want to use anything too weird. I'll be deploying this app with SST, which is a frameworking tool that I want, infrastructure frameworking tool that I want to set up. And so for this leverages the AWS ecosystem. So I want to make sure that something I can have some database solution that I can use off the shelf. So Postgres will be the choice here. For other reasons, not AI related, I just have a lot of familiarity with Postgres. Especially for side projects, I want to reduce the number of iterations I need to learn new stuff for stuff that I've already done in the past. Because that's, first of all, super annoying and a big time sink that I want to just take off my table. Postgres has this extension called PG Vector, which is essentially what we need to do RAG. We'll be able to query directly against the input embedding, retrieve the most similar rows, and we have an optionality to use what particular search algorithm, so that may be something we want to play around with once we get to it. And what's awesome about all this is AWS RDS now supports PG Vector. So that's great news. And AWS RDS is obviously in AWS, so we'll be able to leverage that with SST as well. All right, the API endpoints for generating our AI retrieval augmented generation responses. Again, we'll be using SST to deploy our API, so we're going to build on top of AWS Lambda. We'll not use Docker containers this time. We're just going to use a really simple serverless setup. We're going to create some other endpoints for standard housekeeping, monetization, user authentication, stuff like that, web app stuff. Nothing too crazy. Let's actually dig into the AI API response. How we'll actually be generating these endpoints. How we'll actually be generating the RAG, the AI solution. So before we generate the way it starts, user inputs their prompt. We're going to go ahead and generate the corresponding embedding. We're going to first check that the user is a paid subscriber. Okay, then we'll go ahead and pass the prompt into OpenAI, which will again spit back the embedding that we need. What we'll do is we'll call a stored Postgres procedure. This is essentially a function call on the database. It's going to let us run the similarity check against the DB to find the most relevant responses. We're gonna store each of these data sets in separate tables. So we're gonna run this similarity check just about 3 times. So we'll be able to get a mix of the following data. We're gonna grab the 2 most semantically relevant ayats from the Quran. the 2 most semantically relevant hadiths, and then 1 Wikipedia entry, maybe a few more. We'll see. We'll have to play with these numbers. We're going to feed all of that into an additional prompt. And then we're going to send that over to GPT-4, which will be the LLM aspect of this. And so the combination of retrieval augmented generation for your known data sets, things you cannot hallucinate, into an LLM to generate a full response, this is really powerful. This is, I think, essentially what solves the majority of problems that folks want. Because a big problem with GPT-4 is if you tell it to give you an ayat from the Quran, I would not trust that. It's most likely going to hallucinate something. So by doing this RAG, where we're going to pull from a fixed list of data that we have verified and checked into an LLM to do some analysis on top, that's extremely powerful. And so what we'll do is we're kind of combine all of this, all the source content, the analysis, and then a general disclaimer. We're going to send that over to the user via Discord, and then they'll be able to engage with the content however they'd like. So how do we set up a Discord bot similar to how Midjourney is done? So now that we have the API endpoint, now we can pretty straightforward set up this Discord bot. Again, we expose a really simple /command /ask Dean. That's going to go ahead and take in the prompt. If you've ever used Midjourney before, very similar. So it'll be Aman use /ask Dean. We're going to put the ask Dean bot, and we're going to have that prompt. And for usability, this is an important note. We're going to want to continuously re-edit that generated message to start streaming in our responses. So as we go back here, as soon as I type in this ask Dean, I expect to see some type of percentage complete message in that Discord message. We want to see these ayats stream in, so it looks like the API is actually working and it's a better user experience. We want to see the hadiths come in, and then we want to see this streamed in. Luckily, we're also going to be using Next.js. We should be able to leverage their AI SDK. We'll see how this looks. Again, this is just the overview. Once we actually dig into the software, we can see how everything kind of comes together. But essentially, as responses come in, as the streaming data as the responses from the LLM are streamed into our server, we're going to want to continuously edit the Discord message, just how Midjourney does on Discord, so that they can see the progress of the response being completed. We're also going to use Discord as our sole auth provider. Again, this just limits the number of moving parts. I don't want to recreate email auth and Facebook auth. I don't need to. I can just use Discord, similar how Midjourney is done. And that should set us up for monetizing with Stripe, because now we have user data as well. All right, now let's go into the infrastructure. How to set up a Midjourney bot with AWS and SST plus OpenNext. So this is essentially how it's going to look, right? I think this is broad strokes correct. Again, we'll see once we actually get into it. You are the user. You have 2 different endpoints you can really hit. You have your askdean.com or whatever the domain ends up being, which is the web app, and then we'll have the API endpoint, which you'll hit if you're using Discord or however else we want to set this up. Essentially, we'll have askdean.com and api.askdean.com. So as far as the website, we're going to build that using OpenNext. OpenNext uses a few AWS primitives under the hood, I believe, essentially taking Next.js, that build output, and then mapping it to AWS primitives directly instead of deploying with Vercel. I believe it uses CloudFront for their CDN. It should use Lambdas for everything in the API routes, and it should use S3 for all the statically generated assets, kind of piping it back to CloudFront as the CDN. And then this is all going to hook up to RDS, Postgres. So, and the RDS specifically, we're going to use Amazon's Aurora service, which is their serverless like connection pool for RDS standard Postgres table. The other endpoints, the API.askdean.com will essentially just be Lambdas, maybe hidden behind an API gateway, which again will just point back to the same serverless Aurora cluster for RDS. So very simple. I don't think there's not too many moving parts here, because essentially it is just call an API and generate embeddings. Like it's very simple. Essentially, we're just calling APIs in different places, and it's a really straightforward setup to get this done. So This kind of goes into the details there. What do I expect to learn, and how quickly do I expect to learn them? So essentially, what I have mapped out here is I want to do this project for a few reasons. I want to know how SST works. Being at Vercel, I understand how we have built an infrastructure, the setup with Next.js and the framework-defined infrastructure. I want to see how it looks like deploying something totally directly by hand using AWS CDK, their cloud development kit, OpenNext, and then the general DX of developing on something that's not Vercel, which are automatic GitHub push commits and deploys and all that. I want to see how it looks like to build a general AI solution with RAG and LLM. I think this combo is super popular. I expect to be commoditized soon, and I've seen a few solutions in the marketplace already. So I like to get firsthand experience with how this actually works, and maybe I can apply it to different scenarios later. We'll see. I want to have an appreciation for Midjourney. It's one of the great products of our time, especially with its AI era. It's one of the few darling products. Midjourney, ChatGPT. So being able to build something similar to that is really, I think, a great firsthand experience of how it feels to run something similar and just appreciate the work that went into building Midjourney. Obviously, any revenue for the project itself, because this will be a paid project, which will be fun to see. And then there's this concept in Islam called Sadqa Jariyah, which is a longer-term communal benefit for the Muslim community, for the Muslim Ummah. There's a sense of spiritual joy that comes from building something that my community can use and benefit from that will outlive me. So that's a non-insignificant aspect of this as well. As far as timeline goes, I expect this to take about a quarter, plus or minus a few weeks, about 3 months. I don't want to spend too much work into it. Most of the hard work was just sourcing the text content for ahadith, but luckily that Hugging Face dataset makes it way easier. Otherwise, I'd have to go to something like sunnah.com and scrape all of these, make sure all the data is good, make sure I'm not missing words. So having that data set makes this extremely simple. I expect most of the work to be in fine-tuning, especially playing around with the API endpoints to make sure the responses are actually useful. Obviously, AI programs are really tricky. The LLMs could be useless sometimes. It could just be very duplicative. So fine-tuning that, grinding it down, making sure it makes sense and is useful will be, I think, a big aspect of this. Discord and Stripe, I don't feel would be too difficult. Those are pretty well-trodden paths. There's lots of questions and answers on Stack Overflow where I can get unstuck if need be. Overall, as a personal rule, I feel like you have to scope out the objectives of your side project before you jump into them. There's way too many Hacker News threads of people saying, my side project failed. This was a total waste of time. It's not a waste of time if you explicitly list out what you want out of it. I want revenue. I want learnings. Embarking on a project solo means like I'm kind of at the whims of my personal motivations and fancies. It's really easy to get off track, jump down rabbit holes, and then come back up 6 months later and realize like I have nothing to show for this. I didn't learn anything new. I just spent time fiddling with Tailwind classes when I really should have been doing the thing that's going to push me in my career. I think a lot of this gets, washed over in the cult of Silicon Valley, where it's okay to fail well into your 40s because, hey, you might be there, 1% every day. Maybe you just haven't reached that critical event yet where now like all your effort will pay off. For some of us, this may not be reality. We don't just have the time to keep on a project for years and years and years without seeing any type of outcome. So personally, I need to see value right away. I spent 3 years chasing this VC-backed startup dream and realized there's ways to get more from these projects, to abort out earlier or to double click if it shows signs of working. So this project, it's going to be a win regardless. It's set up for me to win. If there is any revenue coming from this product itself, then it's appropriate to double click into it. Without that, I'll be happy to just finish it, put it out into the world, and take some learnings. So stick with me. We'll build this out over the next few weeks. I'll be kind of documenting the journey of how this all comes together. And hopefully at the end of it, we have a nice Discord bot that we can show off.